So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the transgender issue, specifically as it relates to freedom of speech and free expression on social media and also in legislation and things like that. I mean, we've seen people having their social media accounts banned. Why are the social media companies wrong to censor people for misgendering, let's say?
I mean, I think in general, most people are courteous and will try and respect people. So I corrected my name when you mispronounced it because I prefer you call me Iseult. So for a lot of people, I think it is okay in a person-to-person base to respect their pronouns. But when we want to talk about a male rapist, I don't feel I should have to respect his pronouns because he has decided right before the legal process that he is a she now because he figures he'll get better treatment in prison. And I'm pretty sure that that is why some of them are identifying as women. But it's also so that we can talk about things that affect us as women, as men, and to be able to use the language that allows us to define those things. And when people insist that we correctly gender people all of the time, we erase the idea of sex. And I'm pretty sure that most of the discrimination I've experienced as a woman is to do with my biology, my sex, not my gender presentation.
Do you think that some of this, when it comes to the transgender issue, do you think that some of it is coming from kind of a desire for equality on steroids? Because I think most people believe that equality is a fundamentally good thing to be strived towards. But when you tip over from saying, well, I think men and women should have equal status in society, to saying there's no such thing as a man or a woman and that they're literally the same, that a man can be a woman or vice versa, do you think that it's just an extreme exaggeration of some of these values that we've seen earlier from earlier iterations of liberalism?
I think it's this drive towards personal identity being supreme, creating a very atomized society, and it prevents us from talking about classes of people. So there's a class of people called women who still experience some discrimination in society in certain instances. And it's important to be able to talk about that class of people. So, I mean, yes, I think some people believe that they are driving for equality on this, mega level. But in fact, actually, from my perspective, they're useful idiots and they're playing into a very neoliberal capitalist society. That they are the people who benefit, We can't talk about the classes of people that are impacted by prejudice in society. And absolutely sure that transgender people experience discrimination and prejudice, and absolutely they should have every law to protect them in terms of employment rights, all of the laws that we all are protected by, and they are actually protected by all of those laws. But there is a collision of rights here between transgender people and women, and transgender people and same-sex attracted people who want to define their sexuality in terms of the sex that they are attracted to.
So would I be right in saying that you identify as a feminist yourself?
I kind of identify as a feminist because I feel I have to, but I do have a number of arguments in my head with feminism a lot of the time. But feminism is a very, very broad church. So yes, I identify as a feminist, but I was born a woman.
Because I suppose I wonder about, the fact that for so long the liberal sacred cow was the issue of feminism and women and protecting women, and that was kind of the vehicle by which they achieved a lot of their political aims. And then it almost, as an outsider, I'm obviously not a woman, but as a man looking at the situation, it almost looks like once they found a new vehicle for achieving their goals, namely transgender individuals, women were kind of just thrown on the ash heap and left for dead. Is that, as a woman yourself, does that sound like an accurate assessment?
Yeah, I feel like women have been thrown under the bus. And so that's why, for me, it feels like a very regressive movement. It just feels like a very regressive movement. I don't know how to talk about the sex pay gap because it's not a gender pay gap. It's a sex pay gap that arises when women have children, and that affects their participation in the workplace. But then it goes on to affect their earning potential for the rest of their lives, and they end up with lower pensions. So it is a sex pay gap. It's not a gender pay gap, but we can't talk about that anymore because everything is defined in terms of gender, and sure, gender is whatever you're having yourself,
So it's just reducing it then you think to just the way people feel about themselves. And I mean you alluded earlier when it comes to prisons, the fact that do you think that there are people who are seizing on this opportunity? I mean I'll give a real life example. My sister-in-law was saying that she was going for a job recently, and on the form for applying for the job there were all these information you had to give about your demographic, and one of them was your gender identity. And she realized, she said, I could put down anything here and they have no way of verifying whether or not I actually feel that way about myself.
Well, they've no way of verifying it, and they've no way of challenging her on it in the current circumstances, and that's fine. So I think everybody should use gender identity to get their equality protections, or to get quotas or whatever they want from this movement. I mean, I don't understand. I mean, gender is a very personal sense. And it's very confusing. Like gender had started to be used to talk about women, because I think people in Anglophone worlds didn't like saying sex, because sex is also the sexual act, and so they started whitewashing with gender. So if we go back to your first question about language, this is why language is so important, because the fact that we were referring to all of these things as gender, and in fact in our legal system it's referred to as gender as opposed to sex, means that this movement, which is a huge shift in the whole sort of global understanding, or certainly the Anglophone or Western world understanding of humanity, it's been able to sort of slip in under the language, which I think is just fascinating.